Have you ever experienced this? They walk away, you start to move on, and then suddenly, they're back. Maybe it's a message. Maybe it's a call. Maybe it's just them quietly reappearing in your life like nothing ever happened. And just when you begin to believe things might finally be different, they leave again. If this cycle feels familiar, you're not imagining things. And more importantly, it's not random. Psychology has a very clear explanation for why some people keep coming back, even when they don't stay. Because this isn't about confusion. It's about patterns. Deep emotional patterns, wired into the human mind. Let's start with the first truth most people overlook. When someone keeps returning, it usually means the emotional bond was never fully broken. Even if they said they moved on. Even if they tried to convince themselves they were done. Emotion doesn't work like logic. You don't just decide to stop feeling something real. And that's where the first psychological force comes in. 1. Emotional imprinting. When you share intense emotional experiences with someone, connection, vulnerability, attraction, your brain creates what's called an imprint. This imprint doesn't fade easily. It sits in the background, quiet, but active. So even after distance, even after silence, something in them still recognizes you as familiar and emotionally significant. And the brain is naturally drawn back to what feels emotionally meaningful. That's why they return. Not because they planned to, but because part of them never really left. Now here's where it gets more complicated, because if the connection is so strong, why don't they just stay? That brings us to the second force. 2. Approach-avoidance conflict. This is one of the most powerful psychological patterns in relationships. It means a person feels two opposite desires at the same time. One part of them wants closeness. The other part fears it. So what happens? They come closer, then pull away. Then come closer again, then disappear. It's not a game. It's an internal conflict. They're drawn to you, but also overwhelmed by what you represent. Closeness feels good. But it also feels risky. And instead of resolving that tension, they cycle through it. That's why their behavior feels inconsistent. Because internally, they are inconsistent. The third force is something most people misunderstand. 3. Distance can strengthen emotional attachment. You'd think that time apart would weaken feelings. But often, it does the opposite. When someone steps away, the brain starts to fill in the gaps. It remembers the good moments more than the difficult ones. It idealizes the connection. And slowly, the emotional intensity builds again. This is why people often come back stronger than before. Not because things improved, but because distance reshaped their perception. In psychology, this is closely linked to intermittent reinforcement, one of the strongest ways to create attachment. When someone is sometimes present, and sometimes absent, it creates a loop. Uncertainty increases emotional investment. And that makes the bond harder to break. Now let's talk about something deeper. 4. Unresolved emotional needs. Sometimes, people return because something in the connection fulfilled a need they haven't found elsewhere. It could be feeling understood, feeling valued, feeling emotionally safe, or even just feeling seen. And when they lose that, they feel the absence. So they come back, not necessarily because they're ready to commit, but because they miss how they felt with you. This is important. Because it explains a painful truth: someone can return to you, without being ready to choose you. The fifth force is subtle, but incredibly powerful. 5. Familiarity feels safer than starting over. The human brain is wired to prefer what's familiar. Even if it wasn't perfect. Even if it was complicated. Because starting something new means uncertainty, effort, risk, emotional exposure. But coming back to you, that feels easier. They already know you. They already know the dynamic. And in moments of loneliness or emotional discomfort, people often return to what feels known. Not necessarily what's right. Just what's familiar. Now here's where things become even more psychological. 6. Ego and emotional validation. Sometimes, people come back not because they want the relationship, but because they want to feel that connection still exists. They want to know, do I still matter to you? Can I still come back if I want to? And when you respond, it reinforces their emotional significance. This isn't always conscious, but it happens. And it can create a cycle where they return just enough to feel validated, then leave again once that need is satisfied. The 7th and final force is the one that ties everything together. 7. The nervous system doesn't like unfinished stories. Humans are wired to seek closure. When something meaningful ends without resolution, it stays open in the mind, like a loop that never completed, and that loop creates tension. The brain keeps going back, trying to resolve it, trying to make sense of it, trying to finish what was started. So they return, not always to rebuild, but sometimes just to reconnect with that unfinished emotional thread. Now here's the question that matters most. What does their return actually mean? Because this is where many people get it wrong. When someone comes back, it does not automatically mean they've changed. They're ready. They want something real this time. What it does mean is simpler. The connection had an impact. It left a mark. It created something that wasn't easy to walk away from. But impact is not the same as intention. Feeling something is not the same as choosing something. So if someone keeps coming back into your life, the real question isn't, why do they return? Now you understand that. The real question is, what do I want to do with this pattern? Because patterns repeat, until someone breaks them. And that someone is usually the person who becomes aware of what's actually happening. You don't have to reject them. You don't have to accept them. But you do need to recognize the difference between connection and consistency. Because one can exist without the other. If they keep coming back, it's not random. It's psychological. It's emotional. It's patterned. But whether that pattern continues or ends, that part is no longer about them. It's about you. If this made you see your situation differently, subscribe for more psychology-based insights on relationships. And tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced someone who kept coming back? What did you realize about it?